Hi guys, my name is Jared, and I feel very guilty about locking my girlfriend up in a mental institution. I feel bad not because of the act itself, but because I didn't do it much earlier. I met Elsa a year ago. I was just walking in the park and saw a frail girl dragging a bunch of paint boxes and an easel toward the lake. I offered to help her, and we chatted for a little while. After a while, I realized that I wanted to ask this girl out on a date. And I just glowed with happiness when she agreed. That's how we started dating. We'd been a couple for 6 months, and my relationship with Elsa was stronger than ever. However, the closer we got, the more I began to notice some oddities in her behavior. Sometimes we'd just sit in a cafe and talk, but her eyes would be far away and she wouldn't be listening to me at all. We joked that she was like a cat that heard a rustle somewhere in the distance. I thought in these moments she saw ideas and images for new paintings, but sometimes it just plain scared me. We could spend the night together, but I would wake up to a noise. It was Elsa, and she would be whispering something, conducting some kind of a dialogue. But after all, she was a creative person. I was sure that all artists had certain peculiarities like this. Besides, it didn't interfere with our lives in any way, and I was always happy to be around her. However, everything changed one day when I realized that she was missing. She didn't respond to my messages and she didn't pick up the phone. I thought she was locked up in her workshop and that she was working very hard. But in the evening, I went to see her and there was no one there. Then I started to get really worried. I started having bad thoughts, so I decided to go to her parents to find out if they knew where she was. And when I arrived at their home, my heart nearly broke with fear. Several police officers were there talking to Elsa's parents. Oh my God, I thought that something terrible must have happened. I ran up to them and started yelling and asking about what was going on and where my girlfriend was. However, Elsa's mother tried to calm me down. As it turned out, my girlfriend was just on a hike with her friends. They were going to spend a couple of days at the lake and get inspired to do more work, and they turned off their phones so that no one would distract them. I breathed a sigh of relief. I was glad she was okay, but it was still weird. Elsa didn't even tell me about this. She could have sent me at least one message. Also, I didn't know that she had any friends that she could go camping with, so it was all pretty weird. Besides, what were the police doing there? It turned out that while Elsa's parents were visiting their friends, someone robbed their house. A lot of valuables, jewelry, and a car were stolen. So, when they got home and found this mess, they called 911. I calmed down a bit and went home. However, I couldn't sleep for a long time because I had a bad feeling. Elsa didn't get in touch with me for another day, and then I realized that something was wrong. I started looking for her friends on Facebook. However, everyone she could have gone on a hike with was either at home or didn't know where Elsa could be. The whole day I was in a wild state of tension and just did not understand what was happening. But there was nothing I could do, so I sat and continuously stared at my phone screen, waiting for some news. In the end, I decided that I had to act and went to her parents again to persuade them to go to the police. But when I got there, the car and Elsa had already been found. It turned out that Elsa wasn't on a camping trip with her friends, and she took her dad's car without saying a word. And there was a huge fight over it. My girlfriend yelled at her mom and dad, and they yelled back at her. Enraged, Elsa turned over chairs and smashed dishes. I'd never seen her like this before, but as soon as they saw me, the fight ended, and Elsa's father took me aside to talk. What they had feared had now really happened. A long time ago, Elsa had mental health problems, and the doctors even suspected that she might develop schizophrenia. But after a short course of treatment, she returned to normal. And now Elsa's parents thought that the disease had returned, and they urgently needed to take her to the hospital. And this is what caused such a huge fight. Then he asked me to leave because they had to solve a very difficult family problem. I was very upset, and I just didn't know what would happen to our relationship next. I didn't want to leave Elsa because of her illness, because, well, I loved her very much. But in the evening, I learned something that turned the whole picture upside down. As it turned out, my girlfriend didn't have schizophrenia. She had much worse and more dangerous problems. She called me at about 3 in the morning and told me everything. Some guy named Frank had gotten in touch with her. He worked with her father at the bank, and they were good friends. But then they were involved in some very dark and illegal scheme, and they made money from it. Now, Frank had started threatening their family and started blackmailing them. He had evidence that Elsa's father had deceived and robbed people, and he wanted a substantial ransom for destroying the evidence. Her father denied it, but Elsa knew that he could go to jail because of it, so she decided to take the car and go to Frank to sort everything out. And she made this mess at home to stage a robbery to raise enough money for a ransom. God, that was really something. Now I understood why my girlfriend's father said that she should be taken to the hospital. After all, she knew everything now, and she was a danger to him too. In addition, all of her actions were pretty logical and smart. Crazy people don't do that. Elsa wanted me to help her escape from her parents. They were going to take her to the hospital that next morning. They would fill her with pills, and she would really go crazy. I knew that I might never see my beloved girlfriend again, so I agreed without a doubt. I immediately ran out of the house and drove to her. It was late at night, and I didn't want to attract attention. I stopped a few hundred meters from her house and quietly crept up to her window. A minute later, Elsa opened the window and handed me a bag of her stuff. Then she climbed out. We quickly ran to my car and, without turning on the lights, left the area. First, we went to the bus station and threw her phone in the trash. If the police looked for her, they would see her trail ended there, which means that she had left the city. Then we went to my house, and Elsa just passed out as soon as she got into bed. I watched her sleep, and I couldn't even imagine what was going to happen next. The next morning, I got a call from Elsa's parents. They were very worried about the fact that she was missing and wondered if I knew anything about it. I had to lie to them. However, their search did not end there. One night, my girlfriend's father came to my house, and while we were talking, he kept looking around for traces of Elsa. And this time, she had to hide in the attic. A couple of days later, police officers came to me and asked me a million questions. I had to lie again about not knowing where she was and pretend to be worried and sad. After a couple of days, the dust finally had settled, and we calmed down a bit. However, Elsa was still not allowed to leave the house because someone could see her or she could get onto the surveillance cameras. But the longer we were together, the more strangely she behaved. I heard her talking to someone in the other room, even though she didn't have a phone. Sometimes she would have a kind of a panic attack when she heard my neighbors talking on their porch. At these moments, she would lock herself in the bathroom. Once, she stood at the window and called to me. Elsa asked me if I knew who owned the car that was parked on the road, but when I looked out the window, I saw that there were no cars even out there. It was her hallucination. At that moment, I realized that she was really ill and that she needed help. However, every time I just hinted at it, we would have a huge fight. Elsa would scream and say that I betrayed her. I couldn't put pressure on her because she would just run away from me and I would never see her again. But it was unacceptable to delay this decision. Every day she became more and more paranoid. One day she asked me for another favor. Frank had gotten back in touch and she needed to meet him and solve the problem for good. They agreed to meet at the train station and Elsa started packing her backpack. But what she put in there just shocked me. There was a hammer, duct tape, and a bunch of knives. What the hell was she going to do? It was a nightmare. But I'd already made my decision, and there was no time to retreat. We got in the car and arrived at the station. But as soon as we got out of the car, her parents ran up to us. Yes, I warned them. Elsa started screaming and trying to run away, but we were able to hold her until the doctors arrived. Elsa yelled at me and called me a traitor. I felt terrible to hear her say that. I was just trying to help her, even if she didn't understand that she needed the help. She has been in the hospital for several months now, and I visit her often, but this is not the Elsa I remember. she looks more like her ghost. She doesn't want to talk to me or her parents. The doctors say that we asked for help too late, and that now the treatment process would take a long time, and it is difficult to predict whether she will be the same as before. And I blame myself for that. I didn't want to lose her so much that I made it worse. My poor Elsa. I hope everything will be all right. Everything will be all right.
They say that first love is something you will never forget. In my case, I will never forget it because it taught me a lesson I will keep through all my life. My name is Helen, and I was 15 at the time. Listen to what happened. I was studying at school when all my female friends suddenly started getting boyfriends, our age or a bit older. I was looking at them, clearly envious. I wasn't the prettiest one, but I was also ready for my first romantic story. I was the only single among my friends, and felt really awkward when we went out and they brought their dates with them. But one day, my prayers were heard. I went to the mall alone, and as I was hanging around, a guy came up to me to ask my number. We chatted for a while. I thought he was quite attractive, and a fairly interesting person to talk to. When I came home, he sent me a message and we started chatting. We chatted and chatted nearly all night through, and by 9 a.m., when I came to school, I was head over heels in love. After school, we agreed to meet up for a cup of coffee. When I saw him again, I felt my heart beat faster, and it's hard to breathe. My love's name was Joe, and he was 19. It was pretty thrilling that he was so much older than me, and he turned his attention to humble me. While we were taking coffee, I couldn't take my eyes off of him, and he seemed also very interested in my life, asking lots of questions. Then, he took my hand, and it felt like an electric charge in my fingers. At the end of our date, yes, it was a real date, he gave me a slight kiss. Gosh, I was the happiest girl in the universe. I made a selfie with him to have a material proof that it was not a dream. Next day, I couldn't keep it to myself. I came to school and I told everything to my friends and showed them our selfie. They smiled in disbelief and asked if I was sure he wasn't too old for me. I snorted. This female envy was just pathetic. In the meantime, he was texting me all the time. I was at the lessons and couldn't respond at once, and he wrote me angry messages if I delayed an answer. Oh, so cute, I thought. He cares so much. When I came home, I boasted to my mom I had found a boyfriend and told her about him. She frowned, looked at the selfie, and frowned even more. I disapprove, she said. He is too old for you, and you will get problems with him. I just ignored, and Mom didn't insist. She had always been giving me quite a lot of liberty. So I entered my love story without common approval. And that was okay for me as far as my new boyfriend Joe was interested in me. He kept messaging me, and we met nearly every day. Unfortunately, he refused to meet my friends and told me that he didn't want me to meet his. I agreed because I thought that keeping our relationship half secret is very romantic. Sometimes he became pushy with me. Apart from the fact that I was supposed to respond him at once, he always made me meet him anytime he wanted, even if it wasn't comfortable for me. It happened pretty often, and I was getting a bit nervous because of this. I also didn't like that sometimes he gave me a lift home in the evening and got a little handsy. I was so in love with him that I accepted it, but I didn't feel comfortable about it. Still, I loved him so much, and he was the most beautiful, the smartest, and all in all, the best boyfriend for me. But one day, I got my eyes open. We were supposed to meet at 6 p.m. near the mall, but I came a bit earlier. I saw Joe with other guys, and he was chatting happily with them. I was glad that finally he could present me to them and I would become his official girlfriend. I was coming up to them, Joe not seeing me, when I heard what he was saying. You know, I got that 15-year-old idiot who's madly in love with me, and she is sure I am her soulmate. She's ready to do anything I want. You know what I mean? And they were all roaring with laughter. I froze. It was as if someone had given me a punch in the stomach. I first wanted to leave, but then frustration and anger rose in me. I directed myself towards them, and facing Joe made a monologue about him being a pathetic moron. In a nutshell, I said, "You think you are funny taking advantage of a nice, humble girl? At least I've been sincere all the time. And now think how cool you are having a 15-year-old idiot shouting at you in front of everyone." And I left with dignity. Last thing I noticed was his expression of embarrassment and amused faces of his friends that I hope will remember this episode long enough. I came home all in tears and ran to my mom for support. A wise woman. She told me it would pass, but she hoped I would learn the lesson. And indeed, I did. And it was useful for me all the relationships to come. From that moment, I was more attentive to what people I am with really represent and what my friends and family think about them. I'm glad that episode was my first step towards the maturity. If you have a similar experience of toxic relationships, share it in the comments. Also, please subscribe, like, and share this video to let everyone know how attentive they should be when they start a new relationship with a person they don't know well.